What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's my team selection for Game Week 30. So I'm going to show you how the team is looking. And even though it's not a double game week this week, it does feel like there's quite a lot to talk about. Luke Shaw picked up an injury last night, so do we replace him? If so, who with? Haaland is back in training, so does he come straight back into our squads? And if he does he then become automatic captain? Or do we pick someone with more secure minutes in Game Week 30? So I'll discuss all that. I'll of course talk about my other players as well, and before all that I'll show you how I did in Game Week 29. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. So Game Week 29 was pretty good for me. I got 147 points. I did take a 4-point hit, so I finished on 143 points total. Game Week rank just outside the top 20k, and when you get a Game Week rank that high, you're always going to get a pretty big green arrow. So I went from 191k to inside the top 100k for the first time this season. I've got to be honest, that feels pretty good, because at times this season it has been a bit of a slog. I have made some mistakes, and it took until Game Week 26 to get my third green arrow in a row. Before that, I'd got like 2 green arrows and a red, etc. So to be after Game Week 29, to be inside the top 100k is probably ahead of where I thought I would be. I was always hopeful I would get inside the top 100k before the season ended, but I thought it would happen much closer to that Game Week 38 deadline. So now there's still time to potentially push on even further. Who knows? Top 75k, top 50k, top 25k, etc. I don't know. I could just get a bunch of red arrows and be right back where I started, but at least I've got the chance to push on now. Some people have asked me whether I think top 10k is still possible. I checked on livefpl.net. I think I'm 60 points behind top 10k. That does feel pretty unlikely to catch up, but you never know. Maybe a slightly differential captain, maybe targeting the rest of the double game weeks. Possibly there's still some big green arrows to come. So I'll keep my fingers crossed, but anything from here, given how the season has gone so far, is going to feel like a bit of a bonus. And if you look at my recent weeks, I went from 677k in Game Week 23 to 93k in Game Week 29. So lots of green arrows in a row. I did do pretty well between 23 and 24, but most of the big increases in overall rank have been in the double game weeks. So for Game Week 25 double, I went from 530 to 392. Game Week 27 double, I went from 367 to 237. And obviously the most recent one, 191 to 93k. So when we get to double Game Week 34, and I'm keeping my Man United players, I'm bringing in Liverpool players like Salah, like Trent, and you ask me why, that is why, because it doesn't always work out in a double game week, but when it does, the upside is pretty big, and that is why I like targeting them. I feel like they're some of the weeks where you can get the biggest increases in overall rank. So overall, things went really well. The funny thing is, there was all that discussion before Game Week 29. Do we sell Arsenal players? Do we buy Man United players? And in the end, they are the two players that blanked for me, the players that I brought in. Fernandes and Luke Shaw for a 4-point hit. I removed Saka and Gabriel. Now, to be fair, I got a little bit lucky that Saka didn't start and he only got 1 point. Gabriel conceded as well. But for Shaw to get an injury and only 1 point, especially when Man United went on to keep the clean sheet last night and Fernandes double blanked, you just have to laugh about that. And obviously, it's not great for this week, but hopefully it'll work out moving forward. Every other player in my team returned, and I want to kind of point out a couple of things as to why I really like double game weeks and why I don't think people analyse them correctly, because little things add up, like additional appearance points. And one thing I probably haven't pointed out, but I realised after kind of reviewing this team, is also it's the second shot at bonus points as well. So take Rashford, for example. He only got 1 return this double game week, right? 1 goal last night. But because he got the appearance points in the game against Newcastle, and obviously he got the bonus last night, that 1 goal gave him 12 points in the double. So that is why when people say things like, if they didn't have a double, you wouldn't be thinking about them. And I know Rashford's not that kind of example. We've owned him for most of the season. But when they say things like that, I think, but that doesn't matter. They do have a double game week, so therefore we should be analysing them slightly differently. Like Watkins, for example, he's finished on 17 points. Now, for a forward to get that in a single game week, they've got to get a hat-trick and all 3 bonus points. For Watkins, he scored twice, but because he's got the additional appearance points for the second game and got bonus in both games. He's finished on 17 points with just 1 goal in each one. So that is why double game weeks are so important. And of course, sometimes there are teams like Fulham, for example, in game week 34 that don't have a great double. And because Mitrovic is suspended, they don't really have a huge amount of options we're going to be looking to go out of our way to get into our team. But most of the time, there's lots of players that we should consider. So I won't go through each player individually. Obviously, I could have captained Mitoma or Watkins and got a bigger score, but I was always going to go for Rashford. Kepa chipped in with 1 clean sheet, so did Chilwell, obviously, against Liverpool. And Raya didn't keep a clean sheet in either game, but got so many saves in the first one against Brighton that he still ended up on 8 points. So overall, really great week, 143 points total, back inside the top 100k. Let's try and kick on even further from here. So going into game week 30, I've got 1 free transfer and 5.3 million in the bank. And the main reason that I sold Saka last week instead of Odegaard was to make sure I had enough money to get Haaland back in game week 30 if I wanted him. So I'll discuss that later on. In terms of the defensive options, I'm currently playing Kepa, Chilwell, Trippier and Luke Shaw, but I've actually got slight concerns over all of them apart from Trippier. Now, Brentford away on paper is not really a great fixture. Tony didn't pick up a yellow card last night, so he'll be free to play. But the only other options are Botman and Estupiñán. And with Trippier's attacking threat, I'm perfectly fine with having to play him this week. With the other 3, though, not quite so sure. So let's start with Kepa. Chelsea, as far as I know, haven't yet officially confirmed it at the time of recording, but lots of reputable journalists have been saying that Lampard is going to take over for the rest of the season. Now, last time Lampard was in charge of Chelsea, he didn't really rate Kepa that much, and Mendy played instead. And when Tuchel came in, Kepa actually made a comment about how much better the tactics and stuff were now that Lampard wasn't there. So I don't know if Lampard's going to come in, and now Mendy is fit, just make him the #1 goalkeeper. There is probably a chance that that happens. I'm not really panicking about it because, one, my bench boost is already done now, so I don't need to worry about also having a really good bench for the rest of the season. But also, I do have a playing goalkeeper there in Raya. So if I play Kepa against Wolves, and I do think that is a better fixture, and Mendy ends up starting, unless Mendy gets injured, he's going to play the full game. So Raya would come on anyway, and all it does is changes my transfers for future weeks. So in game week 31, I'm currently planning on buying Ederson, and I was going to get rid of Raya, but if Kepa gets dropped, I'll just sell him instead. So that's the current plan. Like I said, I wouldn't go out of your way to remove Kepa or anything like that, but it's just something to keep in mind that Lampard might make a few changes to that 11, and the goalkeeper could be one. With Chilwell, again, he is first choice. I'm sure Lampard will continue playing a back 5, and therefore Chilwell will be the main left wing back. But Champions League is about to start up again, and how big would it be for Lampard if they beat Real Madrid? So could Chilwell get rested this week? Possibly, but I think unless we know that is going to happen, there's just not enough upside in playing Botman or Estupiñán instead. So, although I've got slight concerns over Kepa and Chilwell, I'm going to play both of them. Luke Shaw is definitely way more annoying because part of the reason to bring him in last week was, one, for the double, where he only got 1 point, but also then for the better fixtures than maybe Gabriel had. So to be injured for Everton at home is not ideal. Now, Ten Hag, straight after the game, didn't play it down, but he basically said until they kind of assess it tomorrow, there's not much he can say. And he basically said he took him off straight away as a precaution. So it's not like he felt, from what I read, because I couldn't watch the game in the UK, he was holding his hamstring. So rather than play on and then bring him off, they just brought him off straight away. So hopefully it's only short term, but it does seem very unlikely that he would play against Everton. So my current plan is just to play Botman instead. And again, double Newcastle defence against Brentford away doesn't sound ideal, but I'm not sure there's enough upside in using a transfer on Luke Shaw. And if I do want Haaland in, that means getting rid of Luke Shaw is for a hit. Now, I could argue that hit is for the long term, so it's worthwhile, but it's not the same when you've got players on your bench and also there's no double game week. So last week it made more sense to me because I was bench boosting, so every player was going to play anyway, and also Shaw had a double and Gabriel didn't. This week it wouldn't make as much sense. And also when I think about the replacements, I don't have the money to go straight to a Liverpool defender who I might want from game week 34, and they've got Arsenal at home anyway this week, so that's not necessarily ideal. I could go to a Man City defender instead, like Diaz or Stones, but again, it's for a hit. So is Stones or Diaz better for this week ahead of Botman or Estupiñán? I would say probably not. And if I wanted to go a bit cheaper, I could look at an Aston Villa defender because they got some nice home fixtures coming up, and obviously they've been doing well recently. But again, is that worth an additional transfer? Probably not. If we hear from Pep and he says that Haaland's doubtful, they're not sure if he can start, they'll have to see and stuff like that, maybe I just go without him and make a defender transfer instead. But I think it makes more sense to just play Botman and hope that Luke Shaw is only out for a short amount of time, because for the next few weeks, hopefully, I don't think even with Champions League, Chilwell's going to get benched for both of these. It might only be one. So even if it was Wolves, hopefully you play against Brighton. I've got Trippier against Villa away in game week 31, and Estupiñán's got Chelsea. So I could just play Botman again in 31 if I needed to. It wouldn't be ideal, but I just feel like it's better than using a transfer. Luke Shaw blanks in 32 when I'm free hitting anyway. So then I'd just basically be hoping that he's back for the double in 34 and beyond, because Man United have got some pretty good fixtures. So the big question to ask yourself if you're thinking about getting rid of Luke Shaw, is there a defender that's worth an extra transfer that's much better for these next few weeks? And if not, it's probably not worth making it. I could just go to a different Man United defender, but there's no point in bringing Malacia in unless Luke Shaw's ruled out for a long time. And I could go for Martinez potentially, but I feel like I've already got Luke Shaw, so is there enough upside in making that switch, especially when it's for a hit? So it's really frustrating because we just brought him in and he's only got a 1-pointer, but in some ways it's more annoying that he's not available for the next few weeks when I really wanted him. But I just think I've got to kind of weather the storm and hope for the best. So he's flagged. Unless Ten Hag says he's fit, I'm probably going to bench him for Botman. And I feel like for my team, that is probably the best thing to do, as long as there's a chance that he's back for game week 34. If he's not, then I might just get rid of him this week for one of those players I've mentioned. Probably a Man City defender, to be honest, Diaz or Stones. So I think my hardest decision in midfield this week is probably whether to play Odegaard or March, because on paper it looks like they've got a tough fixture, Liverpool away and Spurs away, but we know that both of those defences can be gotten at, and also the Arsenal and Brighton attacks are both very good. And I think most people would probably say just play Odegaard, and that does make a lot of sense. The only reason I'm even slightly questioning it is, what if Liverpool turn up at Anfield and not stop Arsenal from scoring, but really minimise the amount of goals that they're going to score? Now, to be honest, when I say that out loud and I think about the Chelsea game, I'm not quite sure that's going to happen, but you never know in football, right? Also, Arsenal are getting closer and closer to winning that title, and the pressure is going to start to build, and pressure does funny things to people. And look, obviously Arsenal are the favourites to win the league now, but we've all seen the Premier League over many, many seasons. At some point, they are probably going to have a slip. It doesn't mean that they're going to lose the title or anything like that, but it's probably not going to be as smooth sailing as winning every single game that's in front of them. And Liverpool away, maybe that is one of those fixtures where that happens. So that's the only reason I'm slightly questioning it. But at the same time, watching that Liverpool defence against Chelsea, and I know Robertson and Trent will probably come back in, and Van Dijk if he's fit, I just think if Arsenal smell blood, there could still be a lot of goals, even though they're going away to Anfield. And also over the season, Odegaard's underlying numbers have been slightly better. So I think it's a lot closer than maybe it looks. But right now I'm starting Odegaard. The only reason that Matoma is not part of that conversation is because I've earmarked him as my number one Brighton midfielder. So he'll always play against March. So right now that's how the midfield looks. I've got the captaincy on Rashford, mostly because I haven't brought Haaland back in yet. But I do think with Rashford, you can at least trust his minutes. He's probably going to go and play another 80 to 90 minutes. He's continuing to score plenty of goals this season. I know the Liverpool and Southampton games didn't go that well. Got smashed by Newcastle as well, but back on the score sheet last night. And that Everton defence isn't very good. I know they had that game against Arsenal, the first game that Sean Dyche was in charge. Defensively, they did really well, but they are still conceding plenty of chances. And I think Man United did well against Brentford, so you're hoping they'll go and do the same against Everton. I've got other options in this team like Kane up front and Watkins against Nottingham Forest, but where possible I'll always try and captain a midfielder. So currently it's on Rashford, but when I bring Haaland in, that will make me kind of question that, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Just on Bruno Fernandes, Again, I didn't get to watch the Man United game last night because it wasn't on TV in Ireland. But he did play, from everything I've read, a little bit deeper. I've also looked at the position maps on Fantasy Football Scout, and he was behind Sabitzer, who started the game, but also behind Fred. When Fred came on, he also played a bit more advanced than Bruno Fernandes. Now, part of that is because Casemiro is out, although McTominay was the deepest midfielder, so that's not the only reason. It's also because Ten Hag wants that ball progression in midfield, and he wants Fernandes to do that job because Fred, McTominay and Sabitzer just don't do it as well. Now, Eriksen is also hopefully returning from injury soon, so once he's fit and Casemiro is back from suspension, we should then hopefully see Fernandes continue to push up into a more advanced role, either in a number 10 or in that kind of right wing position. So I just don't think it's worth using a transfer on him and panicking right now just because he blanked in double game week 29. Obviously, lots of you said that could happen. That's absolutely fair enough. Hopefully you didn't buy him, but I don't want to panic just because of what's happened last week, right? He could go into game week 30, against Everton and play a similar role and not get a huge amount of shots off. Like last night, he only had one shot against Brentford, 3 chances created. It could happen again, but I'm hopeful that the benefit of having him in my squad will start to pay off from game week 31 onwards. And just as a reminder, I know I've talked about this so much. It's Forest away in 31, so pretty good fixture. I'm free hitting in 32, so that doesn't matter. 33 is not great against Spurs away, but as I've just said, that defence can be gotten at. And even if I didn't have Fernandes and I brought someone like Saka back in, and let's be honest, like right now, given that Saka got 1 point and Fernandes 4 in 29, everyone that kept Saka instead of getting Fernandes is very happy, so they should be. But in game week 33, it's Man City away. So I don't think having Fernandes is that much worse. And then after that, they got the double as well. So I feel like I've just got to see it out. I know some people have discussed maybe free hitting in 34 instead of 32. And one of the benefits of that would be to sell your Man United players. So get rid of Luke Shaw, maybe get an Arsenal defender back, get rid of Fernandes, maybe get Saka back. But it just feels like going backwards for not a huge amount of advantage. So I am probably going to stick to the plan and just hope that people panic about Fernandes because of 29, maybe start to get rid of him, hopefully even a couple of price drops, who knows, because that means he's been sold by loads of players, and then he can get me something against Everton. I don't need huge returns, just get me 1 goal against Everton, get me an assist and a couple of bonus, then I'll be much happier about the decision to keep him for 31 onwards. So I get why people are worried, but I do think when Casemiro is back, and hopefully Eriksen as well, that is a different look Man United midfield, and Fernandes will definitely be more advanced, because Eriksen will then be in there for that ball progression. Fernandes can make his impact in the final third instead. So it is a little bit of a worry, but I think at this point I've got to stick it out. Currently Rashford captain, that could change. And then up front it's Kane, Watkins and Toney. And like I said earlier, I've got that 5.3 million in the bank to be able to bring Haaland back in. And right now I'm planning on using my 1 free transfer on Toney to Haaland. That was always the plan. So I took Haaland out in game week 28 because he had a blank game week, brought Watkins in who got the assist against Bournemouth. In game week 29, I did get lucky that Haaland missed out completely against Liverpool, but obviously Watkins got 17 points anyway. So in the end, that was a pretty good move. And the reason that I'm doing Toney to Haaland, not either of Kane or Watkins, is just because he's 1 yellow card away from a 2-game suspension, and he has had those charges brought against him that might, not definitely, but might at some point mean that he has to serve a ban as well. So like I said yesterday, until those things have happened, if it makes more sense for your team to just keep hold of Toney, then you should absolutely do that. But if I'm picking one of these 3 players to become Haaland, I'm going to pick the one that's most at risk. To put it into perspective, Watkins has only had 1 yellow card all season and Harry Kane's had 5. So they're nowhere near a suspension and there's no charges been brought against them or anything like that. And also, Kane has Bournemouth at home in game week 31. So another reason why I sold Saka instead of Odegaard was to make sure I didn't have to sell Kane before I wanted to in game week 34. And with Watkins, I think him and Toney are very similar in terms of FPL options. You probably would say with similar fixtures, Toney is the slightly better pick. But with Watkins, like I said, 1 yellow card all season, Forest at home, Newcastle at home. I'm going to free hit in 32, but he comes straight back to Fulham at home. So in the short term, I can keep hold of him. So I can't see too many reasons to avoid getting Haaland in unless Pep says something that makes me think he's not necessarily going to start. Whatever happens, if he's been training this week, I'd be very surprised if he doesn't make it onto the pitch, because they're not going to want to go basically 3 or 4 weeks without any game time to then have to play straight away against Bayern Munich. So I feel like if he's trained this week, there's a good chance that he starts against Southampton. Haaland, of course, this is now. Even if he only gets like, I don't know, 50 to 60 minutes or something like that. We've seen the damage he can do in a short amount of time, and it was always the plan to get him back. And I think when you've got a plan, you shouldn't always stick to it. Like, for example, I brought Chilwell in. That wasn't part of the original plan. But to alter that plan, there has to be something that's massively changed. And ultimately, Haaland is back. And if he's fit, I want to get him back into my team because I'm going to want him for Leicester at home in Gameweek 31 as well. So turning to Haaland is the plan. I'm going to keep Kane and Watkins. Kane will have to go eventually, but I probably won't sell him now until Gameweeks 33 or 34. And that will be to get Salah back for the double game week. So that's the rough plan. I'm probably going to keep hold of Luke Shaw unless he's definitely ruled out for kind of 5 or 6 weeks. I'll just bench him this week, play Botman instead. Rashford's my captain. I'm trying to think what would make me switch to Haaland apart from pure panic. I feel like if everyone else also agrees that he's going to start, I probably will just switch the armband. But I just know I'm getting good minutes out of Rashford, and I also think that's a very good fixture. So I'm pretty set on getting Haaland in. I'm not so set on captaincy. I might talk about that a little bit more tomorrow once I've heard what Pep Guardiola says in his press conference, but it will be tempting. I know Watkins on paper's got a great fixture. Kane's always a good option, but for me, it's really between Rashford or Haaland. So that's the plan. Like I said, next week I'll probably just get Edison in. That will be a pre-planned transfer to get him in ahead of the double in 34 and in Game Week 37. Whether that's for Raya or Kepa, we'll see what happens with the Chelsea lineup. But if you've enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already, and let me know in the comments below what do you think of that plan, and are you someone that's switching from free hit 32 to free hit 34, and is that because of players like Bruno Fernandes? Let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, I'll catch you tomorrow for final thoughts.